Does "under God" belong in the Pledge of Allegiance? The question you must decide is the Pledge of Allegiance a religious prayer or a statement of patriotism for America? To help you decide, it is important to know the history of the Pledge of Allegiance and the reference to God and our nation before you can conclude if "under God" belongs within the text of our nation's pledge. The original pledge was a vow of patriotism that gained attraction around 1885 when Civil War veteran Colonel George Balch wrote the first version that stated, "We give our head and our hearts to God and country, one language, one flag." About 1892, former Baptist minister Francis Bellamy, who was employed by the Youth Companion, was enlisted to write a new pledge that would be used for the patriotic celebration of the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival to the New World. Minister Bellamy wrote the pledge so that it could be universal and used by children in other countries. It originally stated, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." This version of the pledge was then published on September 8, 1892 by the Youth Companion magazine. Around 1923, the American Legion and the Daughters of the American Revolution presided over the National Flag Conference. Together they redefined the pledge, deciding that to change "my flag" should be changed to "the flag of the United States," so that it would be clear to immigrant children which flag they were saluting to. Just a year later, in 1924, at the National Flag Conference, it was decided to add "of America" to the pledge in the same phrase they recently changed. For 50 years, this pledge is heard from children of schools all around America. In 1942, at the mark of the 50th anniversary of the pledge, Congress adopted the pledge into the National Flag Code. By doing this, they mandated that all public school students will recite the pledge every school day. With this law being a direct violation of our freedom of speech, it was quickly challenged in 1943 by a group of Jehovah's Witnesses. The Supreme Court quickly ruled in favor of the Jehovah's Witnesses and released a statement that no child should be compelled to recite the pledge if they choose not to. Following just about 10 years later, a group called the Knights of Columbus, which was a Catholic organization, lobbied a campaign to add the words "under God" to the phrase "one nation, indivisible." With the direct support of President Dwight Eisenhower, they pushed Congress to pass the bill, and President Eisenhower signed it into law on June 14, 1954. This changed the Pledge of Allegiance to what most Americans know as "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Now let's look at the mentioning of God throughout our history and how it has helped our nation. From the beginning of our nation, the founding fathers understood that government does not give us our freedom. Our freedom comes from God, and the government was established to protect that God-given freedom. In 1775, while forming this nation, the Continental Congress called on all 13 colonies to pray for wisdom. According to Dr. Harold Fraze, an expert on the United States Constitution, he stated, "It always amazes me when otherwise intelligent people are unable to find evidence of God in our governing documents. The Declaration of Independence, the signing of which we commemorate July 4th, alone has 5 references to God. 2 in the first paragraph, 1 in the middle, and 2 in the last." In the Declaration of Independence final paragraph, it states, "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress, assembled appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do. The Washington Post, Eugene Volk, stated, "This isn't just God as a creator, it's God as a judge, who apparently isn't leaving the world alone, but is judging it. It needn't be as limited to a specifically Christian or even Judeo-Christian God, but unsurprisingly, it seems to be tracking at least two of God's major attributes." In the Gettysburg Address from President Abraham Lincoln, he stated that we here highly resolve that these dead shall have not died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Written in a petition to the Congress, it stated, at the end of the Independence War, George Washington directed his chaplain to offer prayer of thanksgiving. In 1863, President Lincoln declared a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, the president called on the country to pray. During these years following the World War II, when this country was fighting the Cold War, "In God We Trust" was adopted as our national motto. When Apollo 13 was disabled in space, the president called on this country to pray. In 1988, President Reagan signed a bill declaring a National Day of Prayer. In Desert Storm, every soldier received a copy of the 91st Psalm from the Bible. President Clinton called on this country to pray when the tragedy at Columbine High School occurred. And on September 11, 2001, this country experienced a tragedy that was unlike anything we had seen since Pearl Harbor, and it was God that this country turned to. President Bush called on people across this nation to pray. Many prayers and many members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, gathered on the steps of the Capitol to sing "God Bless America." In the oath of the presidential office, when it is taken, it's recited as, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of this office which I am about to enter, so help me God." Keeping with tradition, since the first president, almost every president has taken this oath with their hand placed on an open Bible to a scripture that it is important to them. But since people would like to argue and file lawsuits against the words "under God," stating that it is unconstitutional to be recited in public schools, let's last look at the pledge itself. If you read it carefully, you can see that you are not pledging your allegiance to God, but are pledging your allegiance to the Republic. The pledge only describes the Republic as one nation under God and indivisible. It only provides a statement of fact, a fact that our founders created a government on the basis that freedom comes from God, not the state. So it's up to you to decide if the words "under God" belong in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would hope that you're now empowered with the right information to determine that the words show patriotism to America and have served this nation well.